Hello everyone, my name is Ian, you're watching Big Rock Moto, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Today we are riding this beautiful motorcycle right here. It's a 2022 Kawasaki Z900RS. Coming out in 2017, this bike has become known as one of the best all-around naked retro-styled bikes in existence, and this bike is designed to compete with things like BMW's R NineT, the Triumph Thruxton and Speed Twin, Yamaha's XSR900, and motorcycles like that. Now, just to be clear, Kawasaki also makes a bike called the Z900, not the RS, and that bike is a fully modern styled naked bike. It has a bit more horsepower. The engine is tuned for more top end power than this engine here. And of course, the styling is drastically different on that, and the riding position and some of the components are different. So here's how we're going to break down this review today. First, we're going to give you a quick tour, and as we do that, we'll talk about some of the specs and features of the bike really quickly. Then we're going to go for a nice ride on a canyon road on this bike, show you how it is to ride this bike, tell you what this thing is all about. Then we're going to come back here and close it out by talking about how it compares to some of its competitors, and then we'll have some final thoughts. So with no further ado, let's go for a ride. Okay, it's a beautiful sunny day towards the end of March. Let's give you a quick tour and talk about some of the specs and features, and then we'll jump on and go for a really fun ride and show you how it's like to ride. So the MSRP on the 2022 Z900RS, the standard RS, not the upgraded SE version, which has different suspension. This bike MSRP is for $11,749 US. This bike and its Z900 cousin use a 948cc inline 4 engine. This thing puts out about 109 horsepower and about 73 foot-pounds of torque. This bike comes in fully fueled up, 473 pounds, or about 215 kilograms. The gas tank is 17 liters or 4.5 gallons, which gives you a really nice riding range. Up here in the front of the bike, we've got upside down 41mm front forks with adjustments for rebound and compression damping. If we look down here at the brakes, it's a Kawasaki branded radial mount 4-piston caliper squeezing a 300mm disc on each side. I find the brakes to be very, very powerful and have very good progressive feel. In terms of wheels and tires, we've got 17-inch wheels on this bike, which you would expect. The front tire is a 120 section, and the rear tire is a pretty wide 180 section. And overall, if you look at the running gear and componentry of this bike, what they did was they took modern, high-tech, high-performance equipment, but then made the styling retro, and I think that's a really cool combination. Now, speaking about the rear shock, you notice how it's mounted kind of like horizontally like that. That's very interesting. You can see you do have a preload adjustment ring there, and then you have a rebound adjustment but no compression adjustment on this version. Coming around to the back of the bike, you can see this has the beautiful blue paint, which I really, really love. It kind of sparkles in the sun. You've got regular incandescent turn signal lenses, some reflectors here. You've got the exhaust here. Now, I know some people want to put a different exhaust on the bike, and that's great, but I think the stock exhaust for a stock motorcycle sounds pretty darn good. You can see the passenger pegs here that fold down, the rubber on the regular foot pegs, brake lever, of course shift lever on the other side, everything you would expect. Let's talk about the seat height on this bike. So this bike has a 33-inch seat height, which I think is going to be very approachable for a lot of different riders, not too tall. Also, the seat is very wide, well padded, and feels very, very comfortable for rides lasting up to a few hours, though I can't speak to rides lasting like all day or multi-day rides. So coming around here to the cockpit of the bike, you can see you've got these mirrors, you've got these nice soft grips, you've got bar end weights here, you've got adjustable levers for both the clutch and the brake. The left switch gear, you've got high and low here. You've got a flash to pass. You've got the horn. You have a four-way hazard flasher. Then you have this up and down and select to control the little LCD screen here, which I'll show you. Over on the right-hand side, you've just got a start button and an on-off switch. Interestingly, it uses a throttle cable and it does not have ride-by-wire. So let's talk tech on the Z900RS. So there's not too much tech going on here. You can see that the dashboard uses these twin dials with these chrome bezels, which I think are beautiful. They are a great combination, in my opinion, of like retro styling, but they have modern information in between. So you have some dummy lights here and the left pod for your speedometer, tachometer here, red line at 10,000 RPM. And then here, it might be a little hard to see, but you've got a fuel gauge, you've got gear position, traction control indicator, the temperature gauge, and then you've got down here you can select different things like miles per gallon, trip meters, odometer, outside temperature, riding range, and things like that. You also have a clock. So in terms of the tech, what you have is standard ABS, and then what you also have here is Kawasaki traction control. So if you press the select button, this little thing starts to flash, and then you can go through off, 1, 2, or so is off, 1, or 2, I guess. So you have 3 different ways you can run it. I think 1 is more intrusive and 2 is less intrusive, and then off you can do that. But with a bike with this much power, I do appreciate having the traction control. So 4-cylinder engines have no character, huh? Okay, let's saddle up this bike and take her for a ride and talk about the things that you would like to know about it. Beautiful day here, a little bit breezy, so I hope that wind doesn't come through too much on the microphone. Some of you know, if you've ever tried to moto vlog, getting good audio inside of a motorcycle helmet with the wind is actually extremely challenging. One thing you notice when you fire the bike up is the engine has a really distinct growl to it. It has a lot of character for an inline 4-cylinder engine. So I would challenge people who say that inline 4s don't have character or good sound. Pulling away from a stop, I have noticed that riding this bike, the clutch feels a little bit strange. Now, it is a cable clutch, but it has kind of a weird engagement, and it's not a big deal, but coming off of other bikes, it just feels a little odd to me. But you're going to get used to it within a few miles, just like you would anything else. So let's start off talking about some of the things this bike doesn't have. It doesn't have ride modes, and it doesn't have a quick shifter. If you want those types of things, you'll have to look at a different model from Kawasaki. What it does have, though, like I talked about, is that adjustable traction control. Well, it is very windy out here, so hopefully this audio is coming through. Now, why don't we just get the negatives out of the way first? Most of the things about this bike are extremely positive. However, there's one thing that is kind of bugging me, and it's hard to show on the video, but when you go on and off the throttle, I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's very jerky. At the initial throttle opening, there's no way to do it smoothly, and you can feel the whole drivetrain clunking as that throttle comes on very abruptly. So in 4th gear here at 2500 RPM, engaging the throttle, you can feel this loud mechanical clunk in the bike. Now, when you're riding and shifting gears, depending on how you let the clutch out, you may not really feel very much impact from that, but it's something that really bugs me about an otherwise almost perfect motorcycle. Let's talk about the riding position. The riding position is very roomy and very comfortable. I've got a ton of leg room. I have a very, very slight forward lean, which braces you against the wind, gives you a nice view of the road, and I feel like you could ride this bike all day long and go on tour with it without being uncomfortable. So it's got that sporty character, the retro styling, and it's also very, very comfortable to ride. The seat is supportive, the handlebars are nice and wide. So yeah, I have no complaints in the comfort or the ergonomics department. The mirrors stick out plenty far and give you a great view behind you, so you're not looking at your shoulders. I think that's great. I've already talked about the dashboard, but I'm a huge fan of it. I love these twin analog dials. I think more motorcycles should go back to that. I think it's easier to read than a lot of the TFTs that you see nowadays, so I really do appreciate that. The LCD is a reverse LCD, so it's got kind of like white or gray characters on a black background, and it's pretty easy to read even when the sun is shining right on it. It also has a nice blend of different information there. So let's put up the pace a little bit here and talk about the handling. The handling of this bike is superb. You can really ride this bike. I'm not going to say it's a sport bike, but you can ride it in a very sporting manner. Very easy to get going fast on this bike. It has a lot of torque and a lot of power. So the handling, very responsive, feels very agile, a ton of mechanical grip from the tires. Other than, see, there's that snatchy throttle again though. Look at that. Like if I roll off the throttle, the bike just like, it's so lurchy. I hate that. Anyway, getting back to the handling, God, listen to that engine. I love the intake noise of this engine. What they did with the exhaust and the airbox, it just sounds so good. You don't see that on too many modern motorcycles, so I really do like that. But yeah, the handling is great. You have no complaints about the handling, and the suspension has quite a bit of adjustment. The rear shock doesn't have that compression adjustment, but it does have rebound. The front fork, you obviously have full adjustments there, which I really appreciate. The braking, let's talk about the braking. The brakes will give you a nosebleed. They're very strong, very powerful. They come on very progressively, so I have no complaints. It's not a very heavy motorcycle, you know, 470 pounds, about 215 kilos. So it doesn't need a ton of brake, but it does have those big 300mm discs and a total of 8 pistons up front to get you hauled down from speed. So I think it's great in that respect. So at higher speeds, if you can even still hear me with all the wind, 65, 70 miles an hour or around 110 kilometers per hour, there's a lot of wind because obviously there's no windshield. But the good thing about that is no wind buffeting. So you just get a clean flow of air coming onto your helmet. And I think for riders who don't ride a lot in the cold and the rain, you're going to appreciate a bike like this because you get a lot of nice airflow on those warm days, and you don't have to deal with wind buffeting that so many bikes with windshields have. So what have I not talked about? Maybe the gear shifting. The gear shifter is very smooth, just like you would expect from a modern Japanese motorcycle. I talked about the clutch being a little weird. That's only something that I noticed coming from a stop. When you're actually riding, I don't feel anything weird about it. It has a pretty normal pull. It would be nice. I mean, I would use a quick shifter on this if it had it. It's definitely a sporty enough bike to warrant a quick shifter. Let's talk about the engine character. How does it pull at low RPM? So one thing I really like about this engine, some people say that these bikes are like turbine-like power delivery, and what they mean is that even at 2500 RPM in 6th gear at 40 miles an hour, if I roll on the throttle, just nice, gentle torque pulling me forward. So you can roll on in top gear and not even downshift, And the bike doesn't hesitate or stutter or chug like a lot of other engines might do. So that's one strength that these four-cylinder engines do have. They run very smooth at low RPM. This bike is fun. Oh yeah. Yes, please, more of this. Oh, I really need to get a bike like this. Oh, that's good. So I think that's pretty much covers the riding impressions. Let's get back to the shop and start to wrap up this video. Mr. Scotty, give me maximum warp. Full power. Well, that was a great ride. I know I enjoyed myself, and I hope you all enjoyed coming along for that one with me. So how does this stack up against the bikes that this competes with? Instead of trying to go through every separate model and give you all the ins and outs of that, which would take forever and bore you to tears, I think we should just talk about sort of what makes this different, or why would you choose this over some of its competitors. So there's a few things that make the Z900RS really stand out. The first thing is going to be the inline four-cylinder engine. We've talked about how it rides, how it's very smooth, it's really quick, has a lot of power. It sounds great as well, which I think is a big bonus. The engine character of an inline four is so much different than like a Triumph, which has the parallel twin, or the Yamaha that has the three-cylinder engine. They're all amazing engines, they're all amazing bikes. So you're just gonna have to choose which engine character you like the best, and there's no right or wrong, it's just a personal choice. Some things I really do like about the Kawasaki, it's very, very comfortable. I think it's one of the most comfortable bikes in this category. It has a nice large 4.5 gallon fuel tank, which you can take longer rides with. The fit and finish and build quality and quality of the componentry, I mean, the more time I spend with this bike, riding it, looking at it, especially out here in the sun, and staring at some of the details and how well things are put together, this is a motorcycle that's going to stand the test of time. Not only do I think its styling is going to hold up and look good for a long time because it has that classic styling, but the quality of everything is super, super nice, and you're getting a lot of motorcycle for just over $11,000. Final thoughts on the Kawasaki Z900RS. This bike deserves its reputation as one of the great modern standard naked bikes. It combines really classic, beautiful styling with super high-end, well-finished componentry. It handles superbly. The engine sounds great. It goes fast. The brakes are great. It's comfortable. And it's going to be reliable in the long run, most likely because it's a Kawasaki on a very proven platform. There's only one thing that I really didn't like about this bike, and that was that abrupt throttle response when you go from closed throttle to open throttle. And you can amplify that effect by trying to get the bike to do that, and once you know it's there, you tend to let it bother you more. However, I think if you own this bike, two things are going to happen. Either one, you're going to simply forget about that, or you're not going to notice it because of the way you ride, or two, and this is what I would do, I would pay a few $100s to have the ECU flashed. So the reason that this is happening on this bike, and I've researched this, is that for EPA and emissions reasons, and Euro 5 could have to do with that as well, they have to make the bike very, very lean at idle. And so when you have that initial throttle opening, the fueling is just not right, and they're doing that to meet emissions standards. And this is not the only motorcycle that suffers this problem. But a quick ECU flash by many of the aftermarket companies would solve that issue. No need to change exhaust or spend a ton of money. I can tell you right now that if my garage wasn't full of adventure bikes already, and if my wallet wasn't empty from spending money on all those crazy adventure motorcycles and dual sport motorcycles, I would absolutely consider adding this bike or a bike like this to my garage. I love the feeling of riding it. It reconnects to a more pure form of riding that I guess reminds me more of my youth. And there's just a quality to this bike that is hard to put my finger on, but I really recommend you go and ride one. It's a really great motorcycle. So I hope this review was useful. I hope it was informative. Please support Big Rock Moto, and there's a bunch of ways to do that in the description below of this video. I think I'm going to leave the review right here, leave it at that. Thank you so much for watching. Please ride safe, and I'll see you out there.